Okay, thank you, everybody. I'd like to declare the ordinary meeting of Blayney Shire Council for May officially open, and thank you all very much for your attendance. During this COVID-19 crisis, we have some councillors that are going on Zoom. So we do have Councillor Denton, Councillor Somervale and Councillor Newstead who are joining us via video. And as such, this council meeting is also being live streamed to YouTube. So I'd like to welcome and acknowledge everybody who's chose to join us here this evening. In opening this meeting, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Councillors, we have no apologies for non-attendance because everyone's here. That is great. Disclosures of interest. Madam GM, do we have any disclosures of interest for the business here this evening?
Yes, Mr Mayor, we have 3 declarations of conflict of interest. The first one is from yourself in item number 3 on page 13. The report title is the Drought Communities Program Extension. And the reason for the pecuniary interest is that the Mayor, Councillor Ferguson, is potentially quoting on one of the projects in the Drought Communities Program. The second declaration of conflict of interest is submitted by Councillor Somervale. The report title is DA 2020-17. It's a 2-lot subdivision at 35 Ogilvie Street, Blayney. It is item number 13 on page number 44. And the reason for this pecuniary interest is that the property is the subject of DA 2020-17, is owned by Councillor Somervale's daughter. The third declaration of conflict of interest is being submitted by our Director of Planning and Environmental Services, Mark Dicker. The report title is DA 2020-23. It's a 2-lot subdivision and erection of a dwelling, a dual occupancy at 7 Osmond Street, Blayney. The item number is 15 on page 101. And the reason for this pecuniary interest is that Mark Dicker is owner of 7 Osmond Street, Blayney.
Thank you very much, Madam GM. Councillors, we have no public forum this evening, but we do have I'd like to recognise, before I continue, I'd like to recognise that we do have our senior staff in the meeting as well. They are not on Zoom, but they are present here with us. We have the General Manager, Rebecca Ryan. We have a Director of Planning and Environmental Services, Mark Dicker. We have a Manager of Planning, Daniel Drum. We have Anton Franz, our Corporate Service Director, and Director of Infrastructure, Grant Baker, who are joining us here this evening at the meeting. Councillors, I do have a bit of a mayoral minute. It's given me today that Western New South Wales Health actually having a COVID-19 testing drive-through clinic here at Blayney on Thursday. And I would encourage you to use your networks to also encourage anybody who feels like they are unwell or have some symptoms that may not, that they are uncomfortable with. The opportunity, I think it's pretty fantastic, to join, to come down to the car park at the community centre between 9:30 and 2:30. You stay in your car and you'll get tested for COVID-19. Now, what a great opportunity. But again, only if you feel you have symptoms and you're a little bit unwell. It's really important that people just don't turn up because they're curious about whether they'll like to be tested or not. So I'd like to congratulate Western Area Health for this initiative. It's happening here in Blayney on Thursday, and my fellow councillors, if you're speaking to anybody or throughout your networks, please encourage people who feel like they'd like to be tested to attend this Thursday. Okay, councillors, I'd now like to turn your attention to confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting held in April. Do I have a mover? That is a true record. Councillor Reynolds, thank you, has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Newstead has seconded that. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, are there any Any questions or comments regards to the minutes? If not, now move through to item 2, page number 12. That's council meeting date amendment. There's a recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Somervale has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments about these revised meeting dates? No? I'll put that motion then. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, item 3, I have declared an interest in this item, and I'll now ask the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ewan, to chair this meeting, and I will now leave the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge that Councillor Ferguson has left the meeting room. Fellow councillors, item 3 on the agenda this evening is the Drought Communities Program extension. In front of you there you have a recommendation. Do I have someone that would like to move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Kingham. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Mental block there, sorry. Is there anyone who'd like to speak toward that recommendation? Yeah, Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ewan. Probably a question to the General Manager. Given we're now into May, and I think that all of these projects have to be completed by December, are you foreseeing any issues, or particularly with a lot of community projects outside of the ones that the council's operating, are you expecting that they all can be completed by December, given we've got about 6 months or 7 months to go?
Through you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Deputy
Madam
Mayor, everybody's got, the community organisations have all commenced their projects. We've already had a couple of the community groups lodge their first milestone payments and claims. So we actually have had the funding agreements executed and we're ready for the announcement so that they could start as soon as possible. So I'm very confident that the projects will be finished on time.
Thank you, Madam GM. Any other questions or comments, fellow councillors? Great program, money for jam, I guess, in a lot of ways here again, and wonderful projects of $1 million worth are on the drawing board, as you said, for the end of December. So very fortunate to be able to have those projects fall into our hands, I guess, because they're things that certainly wouldn't happen under normal circumstances if it was currently anyway, if we were to fund them without that drought funding. So wonderful program, wonderful community support. So I think there again, well, as we've seen in the past with earlier drought communities funding, we've been able to finish some wonderful projects to improve and make more available facilities right throughout the Shire. So can I just say to the staff and for the wonderful project management that they've been able to do to make these projects happen. So thank you. Any other comments, fellows? If not, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Carried. Now ask Councillor Ferguson to return to the chamber and hand back to our Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ewan. Councillors, now I'd like to refer you to item 4, page number 16. We do have a slight amendment to the wording here. Fortunately, we've had another offer of sale today. Oh, we're not going to do that now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is the Frape Street. The amendment was the lot and DP numbers because the
sorry, I'm on the
subdivision
wrong
was
one.
registered.
On the wrong one. My apologies. Great. So, sale of land, Frape Street, Blayney. Just so we're all on the same page with that, particularly me. Recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've just got a question about how we're going to ascertain this market price. I assume we're going to go to some real estate agents and try and get a valuation. Any indication, possibly through the General Manager, on how we're actually going to come up with this ultimate price that we're going to charge for these 2 blocks?
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Yes, it will be in consultation with the real estate agents. Obviously, we've set a new benchmark with Streetfield, so I'd imagine that'd be a good starting point. Madam GM, would you like to comment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, a sales strategy is not to compromise the sales of land we have in our new residential development at Streetfield Close, and essentially provide the best value for council for the development of these lots. And any offers that are worth accepting a report will come back to council for council to make that decision of whether council will accept that offer for each block or both blocks at the same time.
Thank you, Madam GM. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments regards to this item? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, now through to item 5, page 19, report of council investments as at the 30th of April. There's recommendations there 1 and 2. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Kingham has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Somervale has seconded that. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Councillors, questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick note, and it is noted there that the sum of money that we have at the moment is only 10.77 million, and I suspect, going on the report, that our restricted reserves should be technically at about 12.5 million. That's at the end of the financial year, and we're not far off it. But it is good to see that around about $2.3 million is going to come in shortly outside of rates.
Very good to see.
So hopefully that puts us back to at least what we've restricted in funds, so that we at least have in our general funds some potentially unrestricted money, and we don't actually run out of money from a restricted point of view.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Somervale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope I'm not on mute. Councillor Reynolds is onto my point in relation to unrestricted cash. And I really would like some comment from staff as to what the risks there are in actually not obtaining before the 30th of June, in 6 weeks' time, receipt of the grant funding.
Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Mr Director, would you like to, I mean, obviously it has an impact on our end of year position.
Through you, Mr Mayor, as was touched on by Councillor Reynolds, it would impact on our ability to report our external and internal restrictions. So we would have to manage those so we can report there isn't a negative unrestricted cash figure. But if Councillor Somervale is after more detail of risks, we can certainly provide that. We'll take the question on notice and provide that if he's after further, because that's obviously the major one with restrictions, but there's obviously other risks too, potentially.
Thank you, Mr Director. Councillor Somervale.
Yeah, I understand the crisis if we don't receive the grant funding. I was just interested in trying to understand whether the receipt of the grant money within the next 6 weeks is absolutely assured, or whether there's some risk, procedural risk, administrative risk, not complying with some condition, and so on, that we actually might not receive those monies. And if the Director takes that on notice, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Councillors, any other questions or comments regards to this item? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now move to item 6, page 24, the quarterly budget review statement. Again, recommendations there 1 and 2. Someone like to move these recommendations? Councillor Denton, thank you, has moved that way. Do I have a seconder?
Yep.
Councillor Ewan has seconded that. Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Questions or comments, councillors, in regards to quarterly budget review statement? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of notes or one concern, and I'll continue to pursue it with regard to Newbridge and the footpath. We're taking out the footpath, and it's gone out to 10 years at this stage within the active movement strategy. So again, as a councillor, I'll be trying to get that bit of footpath put back in sometime in the next year or two. There are issues with contamination that are publicly known, but I would like to see that footpath sort of done and not put out for 10 years. So the Newbridge community, just important to note that we haven't forgotten them, but there are a few challenges to get over before we can look at extending that footpath from the new rail overbridge up to near the hotel. The other one, or other area, Mr. Mayor, is the amount of money that we're having to actually move to cover the development costs of Streetfield Close. I think the community should just be aware that we're moving over $300,000, so the project costs have gone up on the original costs. So it's more just to highlight that that figure is, to being taken out of our property reserve. One assumes, so my question back is that once we do sell enough blocks, that that money will be returned back to the property reserve when we do sell enough blocks?
Correct. Thank you. I'd just like to say that Streetfield Close has been so well received by the community. The feedback that I've had personally about council's involvement in that and taking the initiative to show confidence in our town and the take-up of the blocks is absolute credit to our staff and my fellow councillors for actually being involved in something that is definitely not our core business. Councillors, we're still on the quarterly budget review. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just on the Streetfield Close development. There's a comment that apart from moving 301,000 from the property reserve to cover the total cost of the development, which is what we need to do, there's a comment, there's an corresponding adjustment to reduce the expected profit on sale by 56,000. My question, maybe this needs to be taken on notice because I couldn't find it anywhere. What is the expected profit on sale of Streetfield Close? We know it's being reduced by 56, but I'm not sure from what to what.
Thank you, Councillor Somerville. I believe, though, that there was a request, I think, by yourself in regards to a bit of a statement or a bit of a report in regards to the final outcome of that. We're getting closer, I guess, to the final bills being paid in regards to the development costs. And I would imagine that out of that finalisation of that project, we'll actually see what that number is. We're all very interested in what that profit margin will be, if any. But I'm sure, as we all know, that we are expecting a report back in regards to not only the actual total development costs, but what profit there would be. So I think we're all happy to take that on notice at this point in time and look forward to that final report and see where we actually have landed on Streetfield Close. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we have a mover, we have a seconder. I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, now move through to item 7, page 27, the 2020-21 operational plan and the 21-24 delivery program. Recommendation there, councillors 1 and 2, to have a mover for this recommendations. Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Do I have a Councillor Newstead has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to these items? Councillor Reynolds, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look at the rate side for a start, and I encourage the residents to have a look at their new valuations. They should have received them in the mailbox, because that's going to be a big issue, particularly for businesses and residential, to some extent, a lesser extent farmland. There are going to be major fluctuations. So I think our residents need to be prepared. Some are going to go up, some are going to go down, and it's to do with the Valuer General, not to do with the council. We've stuck with the rate peg of 2.6%. So it's important to note we've tried our best to try and smooth out the huge variations as much as possible, and we have increased the base rate both for residential and also for business, and we've created a new business category as well in this proposed recommendation on the rate side. So something, again, I personally strongly encourage ratepayers to take an interest, but also when we do pass the budget come late June, to also, if they do get their rates noticed, that there are processes that they can go through to appeal with both the Valuer General in the first instance, but also with potentially council if they believe that they've been unjustly treated. So, but again, it's up to the residents at the moment, now when we put this out on public exhibition, to actually have a look and see how much of a variation. But we have noted in parts of our Shire, valuations have actually gone down in some residential areas, and other parts have gone up substantially. So that will mean a big difference. But again, can I commend the staff for the work that they've done to try and come up with a reasonable solution under conditions of a revaluation year that will lead to big changes in people's rates. I think that's probably the most important part of this, but again, it's out for public exhibition. There are other examples within the document that some financial assistance, for example, to Carcor for Australia Day, potentially has been cut, but there is an opportunity, or reduced, not cut. There is an opportunity again for those community groups to provide feedback into council if they believe that they should receive extra funds or funds that they did receive last year for their events. So that's, for example, the Carcor on Australia Day. I think they're some of the major issues that I've detected in the preliminary look at the financials.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds, and you certainly made a couple of very, very good points, and I'd like to reinforce the fact that, yes, the staff have done a wonderful job, and it has been a very difficult year in regards to being a valuation year and the extremes, high and lows that we have seen, which does have quite an impact on different rate categories. And I'd also encourage people to jump on our website. We have a rate calculator, so they could potentially just really understand what the draft rating policy might mean for them as individuals. Happy to see, though, that we are actually decreasing our domestic waste charge by $40. That's a positive story. I'll certainly like to acknowledge that, and I would look forward to any public, in that public exhibition period, any commentary or feedback that we may get. Councillors, have we any other questions or comments in regards to this item? No questions or comments? Further questions or comments? If not, we have a mover, we have a seconder. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Thank you. Item 8, page 32, the adoption of the Enterprise Risk Management Policy and Plan. Recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Newstead has moved it, and Councillor Somervale, I believe, has jumped in and seconded that. Thank you. Questions or comments in regards to the Enterprise Risk Management Policy? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Okay, councillors, item 9, page 30. Okay, councillors, we have a slight amendment to this. We have an extra point, an item that we'd like to put up on screen. We're fortunate enough today to have another offer made at Streetfield, and we thought it was prudent to squeeze it in at late notice, be it, and I'll acknowledge that and apologise for that, but I think it's beneficial if we could move this along tonight. So we do have 3 recommendations there. as shown, 1, 2 and 3. Everybody have access to that third. Councillor Dent, Councillor Somervale, Councillor Newstead? 8A. Okay,
No.
councillors, okay, my apologies. Let me read that out to you. So we've added a third one to this item, and that is that council endorse execution of relevant sorry, that's the second one. Okay, we'll get this right in a minute, councillors. The extra item is now number 2, and that council endorse the action of the General Manager to accept the offer for sale of Lot 4 at Streetfield Close, Lot 1 DP 250822 at the listed price of $134,000. So we're wrapping up two blocks in the one item here. So we have 1, 2, 3. Do I have a mover for these? Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Do I have a seconder for these 3? Councillor Ewan, thank you. Any questions or comments, councillors, apart from the fact that what a great story this is? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question, probably to the General Manager. When do we believe that we will have this all registered, tidied up, and the contracts can actually then be exchanged for, I think it's now 10 lots with this extra lot, which will only leave 4?
So through
Madam
Mr.
GM?
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, the contracts have been exchanged. The subdivision has been registered last week, and there's now the process with the Lands Titles Office for actually providing us with lot and DP numbers. So it could be within 2 weeks that we'll have those details. So the solicitors have been notified, and our real estate agents have been notified as well.
Right, thank you, Madam GM. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item? Looking. If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Now move through to item 10, page 35, the Director of Infrastructure Services monthly report. Recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Reynolds has seconded that. Okay, councillors, questions, comments? Pretty good report, pretty busy yet again. Lots of things going on around the Shire. No questions or comments? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Councillors, now move through to item 11, page 39, Leabeater Street Bridge Scope Confirmation. There's recommendations there 1 and 2. I have a move of Councillor Kingham. Would like to move that.
I'd like to move it, but I'd like to make a adjustment to that.
Adjustment, amendment.
Yep. I'd like to eliminate section 2 and insert in it words to the effect that the result of the application for funding is known, that it will be presented to the council for decision.
Kingham, I think that would happen regardless. Anyway, I mean, I'd be supportive of just deleting number 2 if we could find a seconder, but I think it's a reasonable expectation that a report would come back to. So we have a mover in Councillor Kingham, but he's actually proposed an amendment. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Reynolds, you happy to second?
Amendment, yes.
The amendment, thank you. Councillor Reynolds, second that. Councillors, we're back to one item, the recommendation that council approve an allocation of $420,000 for the replacement of the Leabeater Street Bridge, contingent on receiving 50% grant funding. And the proposed amendment is to delete number 2 as it's printed in the business paper. Any questions or comments in regards to this? Councillor Newstead.
Okay, at the risk of upsetting one of my fellow councillors, I still don't think we should even be looking at spending $420,000 on replacing that bridge just for where it is. It's in a 50k street. It's at an intersection I just can't see why it's that desperate to straighten that bit of road up. I just can't see that coming to that intersection, you should be slowing down more than 50 k's anyway. I'd be more inclined to still go with the 180,000 bridge and try and get the 50% grant funding for that bridge. I know that the people of Lyndhurst are keen for this bridge, but I just can't see the money in where it is. If it was on a straight stretch of road that was 100 kilometres an hour, yeah, I'd be all for it. And because there's other access to that area as well from the highway, that's another thing that makes me think that to spend 420,000 on that bridge, I know that includes around about 70,000 in straightening the road. I just, my conscience can't allow me to agree to it at this point. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillor Somervale?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Newstead in relation to this, and it's always been my belief that that for security reasons it's best to have a new bridge on roughly the same alignment as we have now. But I've got a different issue as well. I see the recommendation in the report from staff is that it is my recommendation that council proceed with its single lane bridge design in a similar location to the current bridge. This will normally provide the same level of service currently at an estimated cost of 180,000. To straighten the bridge will provide a marginal benefit to flood immunity of the road at a substantial increase in cost. That's the recommendation we've got from staff, which I happen to agree with. In the body of the report, the recommendation comes out that if we can get a grant for 50% of 420,000, because we happen to have 210,000 in the kitty for the bridge program, we should spend the whole 210,000 if we can get a grant. When in fact the recommendation from staff is no, it's fine where it is, we should just spend 180,000 on it. As a matter of principle, I don't think we should be applying for grants to build infrastructure which otherwise we wouldn't want to build. Just because we can get a grant for it doesn't mean we should apply for the grant and therefore do something we otherwise wouldn't want to do. Here we've got a recommendation from staff that building a new bridge on a slightly different line, but basically on the same location for 180,000 is what staff is recommending. They go ahead and say, well, if you'd like a bridge on a new alignment and you want to spend 420,000, the council will be depreciating the 420,000 when staff don't think it's necessary. I don't think we should be applying for the grant at all. I'd be happy to spend the 180,000 on a bridge on the existing alignment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somervale. We're now discussing the amendment to delete item 2. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Councillor Reynolds.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to actually hear from Councillor Kingham on the reasons why he conceded to justify a $420,000 bridge. So he's made the amendment. He and the community of Lyndhurst are keen for a straight bridge and a slightly higher bridge. So I'd like to actually hear the reasoning, though, from Councillor Kingham on why we actually need the straight bridge and this potentially $420,000 bridge, as opposed to spending up to 180,000 on the existing alignment of the bridge with a similar type bridge to what's there.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I guess we've had this discussion, before. I'm not sure if Councillor...
Is this the right of reply or?
Well, you have moved it. I'm happy. This is a very interesting discussion. I'm more than happy for you to... I won't close the debate, Councillor, so please feel free to answer.
It's probably about 5 reasons why it needs to be straight. Whoops. There's probably 5 reasons why it needs to be straight. 1, it's on private land. Should be, to get it straight, it'll be on the road reserve. 2, A and Lee Beater Street are being sealed, so you're going to bring traffic from the highway around that way, and then suddenly they're going to be faced with a very awkward bridge. 3, coming from Garland, 100 kilometres an hour, suddenly you're faced with an awful turn left onto a bridge. And that to me, that's just a straight out traffic hazard. 4, current alignment doesn't let the water satisfactorily go through the bridge. Firstly, there's debris holding up the water, both before and after the current bridge. The current bridge is below ground level. That's the best that the old timers could do, and I have no problem with that, but the bridge has failed, so we need a new bridge. It needs to be straight. And 5th, and most importantly, the whole of the Lyndhurst community, including Garland all the way down to the end of the Shire, want a straight bridge, because that bridge will be the link between future development in South Lyndhurst to the Garland or the Garland Team Penning, the Lyndhurst Golf Club, or the Lyndhurst Rifle Club. All those 3 activities are on the southern side of that bridge. So what you're really going to do by putting a crooked bridge is you've improved nothing. You're spending $180,000 to get exactly the same result as the old timers 60 or 70 years ago. Like, the modern technology is you build straight bridges and get the water to run straight through. Anyone that's seen the 2 bridges that this council's built between 1992 and 2013, they've straightened up both bridges and the water goes straight through. Neither road has been flooded since those bridges were built. It's very obvious, common sense. You don't build crooked bridges, you build them wider and you build them higher and straight. Really very simple, but I don't know why we want to build a crooked bridge, $180,000 for exactly the same result as we got. So if we want the water to flow through, 1, we build a higher, wider, straighter bridge and remove the willows from the road reserve.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kingham. Councillors, any other questions or comments in this very interesting subject?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ewing.
I guess there's quite a bit of weight in either side of the argument, I guess. At the end of the day, though, I guess, we're building bridges for a lifetime of 100 years in this day and age. Fortunately, we may be here to see what's happening in 100 years' time, but regardless of that fact, and we can't build bridges that are going to be totally 100% flood proof. We all know that, because there's that 1 in 100-year flood. I certainly see merit in Councillor Kingham's argument in regard to because of the activities on the southern side of the bridge, and should Lyndhurst continue to develop in years to come, which it no doubt will, I can see the new development for Lyndhurst will be on the southern side of that bridge. So I think the recommendation as it is probably should stand. Should we gain the grant funding, obviously on the merit of the application, we should use it to our advantage. It does seem a lot of money for a bridge and straightening it, and for the $70,000 included in that for the road straightening. But at the end of the day, I guess it's adapting what we have to the future for the Lyndhurst community. I certainly can see the merit in the argument for the $180,000 bridge, but in 20 years' time, even so, that bridge at 420,000 is probably going to seem a relatively good investment, I would imagine, with if we get the continual growth that we anticipate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ewan. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Newstead.
Well, straightening that bridge, I don't believe is going to free up anything. Like I said earlier, it's a 50k street. Even if you straighten that bridge, you're not going to be able to go across the bridge at 50 kilometres an hour because you're at the intersection within 100 metres or less of that bridge. I don't know how the people that live up around South Lyndhurst are going to like it when a heap of traffic's using that road, when they can easily go down to just across the bridge, turn left, go up to Mount McDonald Road and out to Garland. 420,000, you know, I just can't sit with that, but that's my opinion anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've found this discussion quite interesting, and I've listened to both sides. I've also spent a fair bit of time talking to the community, particularly of Lyndhurst. I've also suggested that in our development strategy that we potentially look at options for developing Lyndhurst. And if we did, there may be a lot of opportunities for far more traffic and far more lots in that area. So in looking at both sides of the argument, I'll come out and support the existing, amended recommendation that's up on the board. I do ask a question though of Councillor Somervale. If this amendment was lost, would you be foreshadowing another amendment on the original recommendation, given that the original recommendation still says that we apply for...
If it's lost, it'll go back to the original.
Is Councillor Somervale foreshadowing another amendment then if this is lost? That's what I'm asking Councillor Somervale.
Okay, Councillor Somervale, did you hear that question from Councillor Reynolds?
Well, no, I was expressing opposition to the recommendation. I wasn't foreshadowing any alternative resolution. If the amendment is passed, well then we vote on recommendation number 1, that we spend 420,000 as long as we get a grant. If we don't get the grant, then we've got no bridge. We've got to come back to the drawing board. I'd be voting against the amendment, and I'll also be voting, if the amendment's passed, voting against the recommendation. If I was to foreshadow anything, it'd be a recommendation or a resolution that council proceed to spend 180,000 as per current budget on a bridge on the current alignment. But I won't be doing that. I'm happy just to deal with the recommendation that's before us, opposing the amendment. But if the amendment's carried, opposing paragraph 1.
Thank you very much, Councillor Somervale, making your position clear. Councillors, any other questions or comments on this issue? Councillor Reynolds, another go?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an addition, as in talking to the community, one of the areas that they expressed some concern, and one of the reasons why they wanted a straighter bridge on top of the 5 reasons that Councillor Kingham has mentioned, was the emergency services route, given the bushfire risk, the trees, the grass, etc., to have an alternate route to vacate if a fire is coming from the west, northwest or southwest in that vicinity, that the current dogleg, etc., makes it very difficult to evacuate reasonably quickly. So that was an extra reason, because I went and asked the community why they wanted this straight bridge, and that was one of the extra reasons that they gave. That's pretty well all I've got, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments? I put the vote for the amendment. I'd just like to say I hadn't considered the some of the points that Councillor Somerville has made, but thinking about it, listening to the conversation and the debate, I really I'm very supportive of us attracting grant funding, and I'm also uncomfortable tonight to make a decision on the future of the bridge. For me, it's probably more about process. The process is we have an opportunity to attract grant funding, and while acknowledging some of the comments Councillor Somerville has made, fair and reasonable comments, I think it's totally appropriate that we do go as hard as we can for not only this grant funding, but obviously for all grant funding where appropriate. This bridge is one of the last potential bigger bridges in our Shire. I believe there is a fair bit of money floating around from the feds, if not the state, in regards to bridges and road infrastructure, whether it be drought money, fire money, COVID-19 money. So I'm quite happy to support the amendment so we can pursue with full vigour the potential grant funding, and then if it was to be not forthcoming, giving this council the opportunity to come back to council and then to debate the options from there on. But I think we need to be fully committed to attracting this funding. It's a lot of money for that bridge, and I think the time is right to be successful with that funding, and I think that's the direction that council should strongly go in regards to this bridge. Councillor Kingham, you finished? Don't like to finish the debate. Everyone's had a good
They have. It's very obvious who's using the bridge and who's not. The whole community wants a straight bridge, and if Councillor Somerville and Councillor Newstead want to go against that, well, I don't know why they're on council. We're expected to take up the views of our residents and pursue them with vigour, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And to put down a crooked bridge when it's hard to access from both sides, it just leads to less use. And the community want it, I want it, and so should the council want it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kingham has closed the debate, and what a very good debate it has been, councillors. I'm now going to put the motion for the amendment, which is to delete item 2 and to proceed with item 1. I'll now move the amendment. All in favour of this amendment, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4 votes in the room against the amendment. 1, 2. Sorry, Councillor Denton, I didn't see your...
For the amendment.
I voted for.
Sorry, my apologies. Okay, I declare the amendment carried. The amendment now will become the recommendation, or the recommendation now is stays as item 1. I'll put that motion. All in favour?
Right.
Against? Thank you. Declared carried.
Can I have my name noted there, please, against it?
Yes, Councillor Newstead.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to make it clear that I was voting for the amendment. I did have my hand to vote
Thank
for.
you, and my apologies for missing you.
Not a problem.
Your patience. Okay, councillors, now move through to item 12, page 42, the waiver of 2019-20 food shop inspection fees and charges. There's a recommendation there. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ewan has... It's touch and go there. Councillor Ewan has moved it. Councillor Reynolds, I'm sure, would be happy to second that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? Pretty good little initiative. Councillor Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to reiterate your words, a good little initiative. It's not going to cost council that much, but a lot of these food vendors have had to either close down or certainly pull back their business substantially. And just a small sort of saving there is a show of support for each of those businesses, and to cost the council about $5,500 is a small token of support for those businesses at a time when they can at least afford, many of them, to actually fund this inspection charge.
Hopefully all get back on their feet sooner than later. Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments? No? I'll put the motion then. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, item 13, page 44, we have a declaration of interest of Councillor Somervale. Councillor Somervale is now leaving the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Somervale. Okay, thank you. Councillor Somervale has left the meeting. Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you. Councillor Ewan has moved that way. Councillor Reynolds has seconded that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, this development application does meet all the criteria, apart from the fact that it is suggesting that it 1,000 square metres. Am I correct? Yep. I think as a council we've been trying to encourage infill development in our older part of our community of Blayney, and I think this is one step forward to see that we're very much adaptable and keen to make that happen, particularly as I said in the old established areas of Blayney, and I think that by doing this, hopefully, you know, we may see some more of that, because we have some quite large blocks in this close proximity area to what we call our CBD, and I think that for medium density housing to happen in Blayney Shire, this is an example of making it happen and a step forward towards that. So I'm very supportive of this DA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm also supportive. Given it's next door to a residential area where you can have the smaller lot size, we don't actually know though because this is not a DA for an actual development, it's for a subdivision. So we have no idea yet whether it could be industrial, given it's next door to the smash repairers, as in it could suit that, as in some form of industrial, or it could suit some form of residential, but that's for a later council decision. At this stage, we're only making a decision on the subdivision. But given it borders with Adelaide Lane, on the other side of it is residential, and you could subdivide down, so it does, within council, it does give us the discretion to make that decision because it borders on. So therefore I see no reason why we should be against this, and should support it wholeheartedly, and then wait and see what is proposed for the site once, if we go ahead tonight and create this subdivision.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. Any other? Councillor Kingham.
I'd just like to ask the Director of Planning, is there any opportunity for a car to be parked on lot 11, or should they have to leave their car on the street?
Thank you, Councillor Kingham. Mr. Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So my understanding is that they would be either parking on the street, unless they sought to a garage development at a later date off Adelaide Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Councillor Kingham.
Can I just get a better explanation on that? Are we allowed to allow a development where a vehicle cannot be parked on their lot? My understanding is if you're going to develop a lot, you need to have off-street parking. If we allow this, we're allowing it, understanding that the car would be left on the street. I mean, almost every person with a house would have a vehicle or two. It would be two vehicles, and so don't know whether it's a good precedent to be allowing a development when the vehicle must be parked on the street.
Division at this moment. I'd like comments on some of Councillor.
Yes, Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor. So I can't quote the provision of the development control plan off the top of my head. I think you may be correct that technically street parking should be provided. However, given the proximity of the location, that it is very central, it is probably the location to not have off-street parking. But I also note there is no proposal at this point in time for a garage, so they could actually put one in later at a later date. We can't compound them to have a garage there now.
With the DA, a future,
If they ever wanted to lodge one.
just about the subdivision at this DA process, that's when.
Just in addition, council engineers haven't required an external access either off Adelaide Lane.
Potentially, it's still a business zone. Future DA could either be a residential house or a business. Conditions.
Mr Mayor, that's the rear lot. Yes, it's a B zone, so it is open. I think council lot the existing. So information is that better, Mr Mayor? So just to reiterate that, so Councillor Kim was talking about the existing house at the front. So the referral through infrastructure services did not require new access to that lot, and it would be the ideal lot given its proximity to town to allow off-street parking. So on-street parking, sorry. I hope that answers the question.
Good question, Councillor King. Thank you. Any other questions or comments, councillors, in regards to this item? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. Will show a division that it was unanimous. Councillors, and you could, General Manager could now contact Councillor Somervale to rejoin our meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councillor Somervale has now rejoined our meeting. Councillors, now I'd like to draw your attention to item 14, page 82. PA 2024, erection of a shed, 6 Patrick Close, Blayney. Recommendation there. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Denton, thank you. Has moved that way. Councillor Newstead, thank you. Councillor Newstead has seconded that. We have a mover and a seconder. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've gone and had a look. I'm surprised that no neighbours have put in comment with regard to the DA. It appears that 5 Athol Street and 6 Haddon Place would probably both be impacted. Probably more 6 Haddon Place. From the visual impact, the one concern I do have is the size and the height of the shed, which will become visually visible to a reasonable number of people. And it's in the back corner there. So it will impact on the skyline, I suppose you could say, with the size and height of the shed, and particularly as the block is elevated, so it goes up the back. There appears to be some excavation or some work that's already been done on site, so I'm just wondering whether council should be looking at that as well. I know it's not being considered tonight, but has someone done some preemptive work before an approval was given? But But overall, given there were no objections, while I am concerned about potential impact on the skyline, I will be voting in favour of this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Councillors, any other questions or comments? Councillor Ewan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe in the DA that the plan or the design of the shed is a cut and fill, so the shed will actually sit reasonably low on the what is a really large block, I guess, from my understanding. Would I be correct? Can I ask a question to our Department of...
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ewan. There's a question to the Director in regards to how low, I guess, the shed is sitting in the block, which will offset the potential height impacts for the neighbours.
Mr. Mayor, so the difference between the current ground level that has been cut and the top of the existing fence there is approximately 3 metres. The top of the ridge height for the shed is approximately 3.6 metres. Should give some scale, indication of scale.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewan. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to the shed? I'm certainly happy to see it has a bit of shape to it. It has a carport on the end of it and a veranda at the front, and I think that does give it a little bit of more amenity to the residential surrounds. Yes, it is quite a large shed and it is outside our DCP, but I think the position of it and the engagement with the neighbours has been quite a reasonable process, so I think it does bear some consideration for approval. Any other questions or comments, councillors, before I put the motion? I'm just checking everyone on Zoom. Everyone's good? Okay, I'll now put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declared carried. I call a division. That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Now move through to item 15, page 101. Director of Environmental Services has declared an interest in this. Has now left the meeting. Page 101. The recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Newstead has moved that way. Councillor Denton. Good hand raising, Councillor Denton. Has second that. Councillors, any questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Kingham.
Mr. Mayor, the driveway for both residences, or particularly the back residence, that 3.6 metre driveway, does that still belong to the first lot? And are they responsible for the upkeep, the development and the upkeep of that right of way? So I'm interested about how the first block maintains ownership and development and maintenance of that 3.6 metre wide driveway. Or is it the responsibility of the owner of the second block to contribute to the maintenance of that 3.6 metre driveway?
Thank you, Councillor Kingham. I'll now refer that question to our Manager of Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's not, we don't specify exactly how that arrangement will work. We acknowledge that the right of way is there and that for practical purposes that will serve the rear lot. It will depend on how the developer and whoever their advisor is, solicitor or conveyancer, whoever's helping them with that process, will depend on how they set the restriction in the Section 88B instrument, which runs with the land. Text, which explains what's going on a deposited plan, will depend what's in there as to how that works. Historically, and I can speak from my own experience, I just said right of way to the benefit of that lot, which means that the owner who's burdened by the right of way simply has to provide that right of way the lot that is benefited by the right of way. So we don't get into the specifics of who has to maintain it. Whoever purchases the property if it's sold, whoever purchases it, they go into that. A solicitor or conveyancer should look at that issue and should advise them of what that requirement would be, so they buy it eyes wide open and know what the obligation will be on them in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Kingham. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item? Councillor Newstead. John.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. Sorry about that. I know in the workshop, Councillor Kingham asked about a fence running down the side there. If he has a look on page 123, you'll see that there is a fence that runs down the side of that driveway and around the back. Just for your information there, Dave. Oh, Councillor Kingham.
Thank you, Councillor Newstead. Councillors, any other questions or comments in regards to this item? Any other questions or comments? I'll now put the motion. Excuse me. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? I declare carried. Call the division. Again, unanimous division. Thank you. We'll now invite the Director to come back into the meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you, councillors. The Director has now returned to the meeting. Now draw your attention now to page 137. We do have a matter to consider in closed committee. So in accordance with the Local Government Act 93 and the Local Government General Regulation, in the opinion of the General Manager, the following business is of a kind as referred to in section 10.2 of the Act and should be dealt with in part of the meeting closed to the media and public. Item 16, the General Manager's Annual Performance Review. Can I have a mover that we go into closed committee? Councillor Reynolds has moved that way. Councillor Denton has seconded that. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare carried. We now go into Committee of the Whole. Okay, thank you, councillors. We are now back into open council, back into our meeting. We have concluded our committee of the whole agenda, and the recommendations are: 1, the report of the General Manager's Review Panel be received and adopted by Council. 2, that Council endorse the variation to the General Manager's contract to allow attendance to the Australian and New Zealand Officers Group network. And 3, that the General Manager be congratulated for another very successful year. Okay, councillors, that concludes our meeting tonight. It's been a very interesting meeting, having half my councillors here and the other half on Zoom. I hope that I've been able to manage that to everyone's satisfaction. They feel they could participate. And again, thank you for your attendance. And now I'd like to officially declare the meeting closed. Thank you.